Welcome back to another episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamone, and I'm an acceptance coach who helps people to heal from grief, loss, and trauma to discover their self acceptance and step into their personal power. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode shares insightful and inspirational stories along with practical tools and actionable insights that can help guide you along your healing journey. Today, I have an awesome guest with us. His name is Jeff. He describes himself as awake now, but it wasn't always that way. For years, he lived in a fog, caught in the emotional fallout of a toxic marriage that led him to even more devastating divorce. It was a battle he didn't see coming and one that left him slandered, displaced, and stripped down to what he calls nothing but the clothes on his back. At the time, Jeff was trying to solve a heart problem with his head, and life simply didn't make sense. But once he recognized that, he had made a choice. He had a choice to make: stay in victimhood or learn how to rise, and he chose how to win. Today, Jeff has rebuilt his life. He's in a healthy, loving relationship and has a strong bond with his kids and is living his purpose. He's building a legacy and embracing life as the grand adventure that it's meant to be. Through Divorce Daddy, Jeff now helps others navigate heartbreak, reclaim their power, and write a better chapter on the other side of loss. Jeff, I want to welcome you to the podcast this morning.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Nice introduction.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm really glad that you and I got to meet a couple weeks ago, and I'm excited to hear more about your story today.
Yeah, I enjoyed our meeting when we spoke. I think we have a lot in common.
So tell our
Um,
audience a little bit more about yourself.
sure. I think it was, I think about 12, 13 years ago at this point. I had the breakdown of my marriage, and I don't think I was prepared for what came after that. It was like this going over the edge of a roller coaster, and all of a sudden you're picking up speed and steam, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. I don't know anything would have prepared me for it, but um, it was a shocking experience to go through. So my marriage ended. Um, Basically, I'd left with absolutely nothing out of my house, and I didn't have a glamorous house or anything like that, but to have that yanked away, to be called all sorts of names, to um, fight over money, which seems like such a small thing, but it becomes such a big thing in a divorce. And to have yourself torn down over money is just such a humbling experience, because it's like you as a person matter less than this thing, this imagined number in my bank account. So um, there were some dark times there. Some very dark times. I got into some, escapism as much as possible: alcohol, drugs, sex, all those addictions. Um, and then, and then I think it's an easy thing to start to recover. No, that's not right. It's an easy thing to look at the reasons why you should recover or want to recover. I had two young kids at the time, and I noticed my anger was being not absorbed. My anger was infecting them, and I noticed they were getting angry. And that was when I just and the other thing is, I realized that I left my last relationship to model a good relationship for them. I didn't want to be modeling a toxic relationship for them. I don't recommend staying in a relationship that is toxic. I have friends who are in toxic relationships. Don't stay in that, because you're telling your kids that it's okay to be in that relationship. You're modeling that for them. So if you're modeling that for them, they are going to live that. And that seemed like such a terrible thing to pass on to my kids. So I was in a new relationship and I noticed that some of the same arguments, I was having some of the same arguments from my marriage in my new relationship. And I went, hang on here. I'm the common denominator here. I don't want to keep that going. So I started looking inside. Luckily, I had a great coach. She helped me like learn to understand what the emotions I was feeling were and really go inside myself and have a hard look at those nooks and crannies that most people don't look at. And once I did that, life started to open up. I started to feel calmer. I started to feel more centered. I had a more present relationship with my new partner, um, my kids, people in my life, and life's much better now. I'm a completely different person now than I was back then. I think there's this dividing line in my life, very clear dividing line in my life. There's old Jeff and new Jeff, and the old Jeff was very depressed, and life pushed me around. And um, divorce was what I call the baseball bat that's there to wake you up.
I love that you said that because I think a lot of us go through life in many ways on autopilot. And I was really glad you brought up encouraging other people that are in toxic relationships to leave them. I think that's a very bold statement that needs to be said more because oftentimes we go through autopilot where we just tolerate and allow things. And eventually, at a certain point, it's going to blow up. And that can be in a various amount of ways. Divorce is one of them, but there's lots of other ways that can crack and fall apart in life. And I think, as you said very eloquently, the moment that we realize that divider line, that baseball bat that comes swinging in and hits, that's really a new beginning and a new start for us. And life is pushing us over there, oftentimes when we're not seeing it. And so life kind of gives us that push start that we need or that kick start to start that new journey. So I appreciate you sharing that perspective.
It's not easy. Um, it's but it's life bringing our attention to something that maybe we've ignored for too long. If I can share another strategy for noticing these things, there's the baseball bat metaphor. There's also the feather, the brick, and the truck. And most of us, life speaks to us. It sends us little messages, and sometimes it comes in the form of a feather. But most of us ignore those feathers. We go, yeah, whatever, I can deal with that later. And then we get hit with the brick, and maybe the brick leaves a little bruise on our head, or it gives us a bump, and usually still we ignore that. And maybe life throws a few bricks at you until one day it gives you the truck, and you can't ignore the truck. The truck is there to wake you up.
I love that analogy because that's really what life does to us. And I don't think, I've always had this belief in my mindset, and I share it in coaching that a lot of people go through life thinking things happen to us, and we become the victim of our circumstance. And I'm of the mindset after everything I've gone through personally in my life that all these things happen for us. Even divorce happens for us. Divorce doesn't happen just because or because people got bored. It doesn't work that way. It's usually a big life shakeup. And I think that what you hinted at in your story that you shared with us as we got started, there was a big shakeup that happened. And I know you brought up money was a big part of that. And I've talked to many people that have gotten divorced. And one thing that you pointed out that was really strong is just that oftentimes these other factors that aren't even ourselves become more important than the partner we valued in our relationship. And I can't imagine how hard that must have been to go through that experience, but I can see that you were able to go through that rough patch there, but come out the other side really evaluating your life and evaluating yourself. And that's what I love about what you said here as we started the podcast. You started to question those moments where arguments were coming up in the new relationship you had. And you actually, I love that you brought up the analogy of the truck because I do think that those truck moments are the ones that say it's time for us to question ourselves and not look externally anymore, but question within is there something we're contributing to that's causing this, and how can we take back control of that and change that narrative?
I think it only serves us to notice those moments as soon as possible. So I'm still not perfect at it, but I'm better at noticing the bricks before they get to the truck. And I'm still working at noticing some of the feathers. Sometimes I notice a false feather, if I can coin that term, or I sometimes still miss the feathers. I'm dealing with a bit of a truck these days, a bit of a different truck, not related to my relationship, but I look back and I see the bricks and I see the feathers, and it's hard not to self-criticize, like, why did you miss that? It's so obvious in retrospect.
I, I think that's a big part of the grief journey and the healing journey for a lot of people is I've always said hindsight's 2020. We can always look backwards and see, oh, I probably shouldn't have said this or done this, or I could have responded differently, or I wish this didn't happen. We can always look backwards and see it really clear. I think the hard challenge, like you said, is being able to spot those feathers and bricks, as you call them, in the present moment when you're actually trying to move forward. Um, I wanted to ask you about that situation, that time period for you. What were some key turning points that occurred in that process for you as you were going through the divorce and even for that matter, trying to figure out what those next steps were?
Next steps, turning points. Turning points, this is one I still feel a lot of guilt about, is talking shit about my ex when the kids could hear. um and I know that's not the best, and it was meant to be a conversation with somebody else, but I'm sure they overheard it. And what it made me realize was I could lose that relationship with my kids if I didn't clean it up. And that was a very humbling experience. Um, so that's what I brought into that. Um, there was a moment when, and then we went to court twice. I spent well over $100,000. We didn't have that much stuff. I don't even know what the argument was over. It was just like, who could be more right. And the court system is just designed to take as much money from you as humanly possible. So one of the turning points was, you know, we're sitting in two offices side by side, and the lawyers go back and forth between them, and they do their little negotiating, whatever it is. And I'm sitting in that office while my lawyer's negotiating, and I just went, I turned to my partner and I went, like, what's the point of this? What are we doing? Like, we're arguing over a couple $100 a month, and like we're spending 300, no, I think it was like $500 an hour, something ridiculous. We're spending $500 an hour. We're going to be here 8 hours. That's $4,000. What are we doing? Like, and I just went, and my other thought was, just give her what she wants, and I'll take that energy and go make more money. And I'll stop letting, I'd stop letting her live rent free in my head. And when I could get her out of my head, like I was so angry. I would wake up in the morning, I was angry. I would go to bed, I was angry. I would wake up in the middle of the night, I was angry. But just give her what she wants. She'll be happy. She'll be quiet. She'll go over there. I'll go over here. I'll go live my life, and um, we'll I can focus on myself. One of the principles I say is, put your own oxygen mask on first. Help yourself first, because you can't help others if you are in a bad place. So by giving her a couple $100 a month, I'll go over here, I'll work on myself, and live a much better life, and that worked out really well.
I think that's one of the most challenging parts of divorce is it's exactly what you brought up. And I've used the analogy over the years as I've noticed. I worked in the mortgage business for about 8 years, and I dealt with a lot of people going through divorce or recently divorced, and I oftentimes saw how messy that was. And what I saw, this analogy I use a lot when I'm coaching partners is that when you go through that, it's almost like two kids turning their back to themselves, and they no longer want to see each other or even for that matter, acknowledge one another. And it becomes a very personalized, victimized attack on one another, as you've described about the back and forth with money. And it becomes this thing of just, I got to get my way or no way situation. I've seen that a lot happen. And what I think sad about that is it put you in that situation you just described of, paying your partner a couple $100 a month just to keep the peace so you can actually find peace on the other side to allow yourself to work on things. And one thing that I learned from a lady that got divorced many years ago that I thought was very shocking is I've been used to the stories like I've heard from you today. She told me when she and her husband got divorced, it was a really peaceful, amicable thing. And I looked at her and I said, how is that? Because I said, I don't ever really hear that at all, if anything. And she said, it took a lot of work and a lot of conversations, but we came to a place of it wasn't worth hurting either one of us because both of us in that situation lose. And so she said we actually ended up coming to a place of understanding we were very different people and we just were not going to see eye to eye on things. It just wasn't going to happen because we grew apart in life. We were just living two different lives. And I thought it was really powerful to hear that acknowledgement out of somebody in the realm of divorce because I wish that more people would look at it in that aspect instead of trying to tear down their ex-spouse through court and through money and all these other avenues of things. Because I do think at the end of the day, going through a divorce is hard because we've been married. I don't know how long you were married, but you're married for a very long time. So there's a routine, there's a process you're used to, there's a life you're used to. And that all comes halting, crashing, stop. And then all of a sudden it's, how do I recreate this new life? What's this look like? Or how's this going to be? And it creates a lot of very deep uncertainty for a lot of people. What I see from you is you learned and grow through that experience, and your kids became one of the driving force for you to become a better person in your own life.
Regarding that person that said we had discussions, that's assuming the other both people want what's best for each other. And I don't know that's the case in a lot of situations. Um, I don't believe that was the case in my situation. But what I will say is what comes out in those stress situations are, and divorce is such a one, it's going to bring out every single one of your stress indicators. Is oh, I lost my train of thought. It's going to bring up those all of those abandonment wounds. It's going to bring up any other story you might have, like lack of not not being able to be loved, not being able to um, not feeling security. And that's where money comes in. Um, the loss of the relationship, the loss of routine, like you were describing, and it's this way of trying to stay connected to each other. Um, even if you're fighting, you're still staying connected. It's just a weird way to stay connected. Um, it's that old saying, the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. So if you can get to that place of
Mm.
indifference, that's how you win the divorce. And I don't believe about winning, but winning is finding your peace. That's how you win. It's
Jeff,
not about getting.
I'm really glad you said that. Tell me a little bit more about how you came across that, because that's a very unique approach I haven't heard yet in the divorce realm
Oh,
about seeking indifference versus winning. I think that's a very powerful mindset.
well, you're still being driven by the other person if you're trying to win. Isn't there a bigger life out there? Like what if your real purpose in life is something bigger than just beating the other person at your divorce, getting a better car, getting a better house. The where I learned it from is I don't have my yin and yang here. Imagine a yin and yang. You have the dark side, you have the light side. If you have more dark than light, that is resentment. If you have more light than dark, that's infatuation. So both of those are stories. Neither of them are true. What's truth is there's as much good as bad. When you hate somebody, you see more negative than positive. That's not true. Everybody's the hero of their own story, so everybody's going through life and they're doing their thing, and they think they're acting in the right way. The chances of you being right are just about zero.
I I love.
So so where I take the way out of the story is to find the balance between those two things. To find what if you're seeing too much negative, find the positives that are there. So balance that equation. And when you can do that, so in my case, my divorce woke me up. It taught me emotional maturity. It taught me how to value relationships. It taught me how to get focused and make more money. It taught me how to stand up for myself because I was a pushover in my old life. Um, so that's how I learned to balance my positives and negatives. That's how I learned to, yeah, I call it loving your divorce. You either have resentment, you have infatuation, or you love something. Loving is seeing the positives and negatives in equal amounts and still choosing to be there.
I feel like that's a really powerful outlook on divorce, and I love that you described all the good that came from that because I share a lot on this podcast, for example, that we always, if we go through life looking at things that they happen to us, we will always be in a victim mentality of things. We'll be a cause of our circumstance, and that's where we're giving away all of our control, like you said, giving control to your spouse, you're giving power away all the
Mhm.
time. But when you're able to go within and turn that locus of control within yourself and start really focusing on what are the actual goods that are coming out of this, because I do believe every moment of life gives us either a gift or a lesson or a blessing. And sometimes, as you hinted at, divorce gave you a lot of lessons, but it also gave you a lot of blessings too. And for you to focus on the lessons and the blessings, I think that's what made you a better person in life. And I think that what it sounds like is your divorce was a chapter of life, a very powerful one. And it was one that steered you into a different direction, into alignment of who you actually needed to become. And I think that's really a powerful experience and a powerful perspective that you just shared.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's why I'm doing the work I'm doing is because I think a lot of men come out of divorce worse off. And because they don't choose, they get stuck in that, my ex is a horrible human being. And I was there for a long time. But if you stay there, you're there's a mirror. You're really saying it about yourself. So the shift is okay. There's a lesson here. Let's go forward.
Uh, So I want to ask you, Jeff, because I know you have a business, Divorce Daddy. Tell me a little bit
Mhm.
about how did you create Divorce Daddy? What time frame did that happen at after you got divorced, and where did you come up with that idea?
Oh, it's 10 years in the making. I didn't start working on it until I felt I was at a place where I could actually help people. But I think it's a next natural step in healing. First, you heal yourself, and then you want to help others. Um, I had coaches throughout my divorce, and I found them. I did both. Um, I'm blanking on the term. Therapists, therapists, and coaches, and I found coaches way more helpful. And I had a few coaches, and they kind of took me down this spiritual path where it's about basically what we just talked about learning to balance things and and learning to look within and how to listen closer and closer. So I got to this point where I was in tech before this. I did about 25 years of tech, and I just remember one day I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm ready for the next step. And so I've been working on Divorce Daddy for about 2 years now, just refining the program, taking what all my coaches taught me, and creating something specific for um, men going through divorce. Um, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I love that story. I'm always curious how everyone comes across, especially us in the coaching industry. A lot of us have an array of life experiences, and oftentimes what people don't know about coaches is that our life experiences have often been some of the most brutal moments of our life, the ones that really, what I like to call shape shifted us out of who we used to be and propelled us forward into who we become. And the reason I asked you that question is exactly what you shared, is that that didn't come right away. That was something that was years in the making. And I
Yeah.
also applaud you for the bigger one, which is similar to my journey, by the way, that I had to be in a place where I could help people. And I knew that, as one of my coaches said, you got to clean up your own backyard before you start helping others with theirs. And I never fully understood that many years ago, because I saw myself as somebody that could always help people. And that part was always true, but there were things now, as you alluded to, and myself, that we just had to work on those parts of ourselves that we could be in a place to actually help and serve other people. Hence your example of put your face mask on before you help other people. So I think that I ask that question because I always want to show people that becoming a coach is really about going through some hard times in life, times where you don't always know the answer. You're not always going to have, uh, rainbows, unicorn, and glitter going through that. It's going to be dark days, very trying times, very question yourself, question how you're going to handle things, not knowing where this outcome's going to go. It's a long process to really start up your own coaching business and your own program. So I'd appreciated you sharing what that process looked like for you.
Well, I think that one of the most important things fathers pass down to their kids is wisdom, and you gain wisdom. Wisdom is the event minus emotion. So you gain wisdom by going through hard times. You gain it by getting your ass kicked up and down the street and learning what the lesson is on how to win. And then to your point about going through the hard times and making something out of it, I got to this point where it was like I have this thing. I think I have this gift to help people really look at themselves and hold them there, and I think I'm pretty good at holding um, people's energy when they're going through a hard time, and I think that's an important part of a coach. And but I didn't know what to do with it. And just to give them a plug here, I went through Tad Hargrave's program, Marketing for Hippies, and it was very useful because he said, um, build your business around your deepest wound, and that's where you serve people from. So I don't know if that was my deepest wound, but that was a pretty good one. Um, and I think it's underserved, I believe. I don't When I went through it, there was nothing, there wasn't really much in the way of helping men through divorce. And even now, yes, there's more of it, but I find it focuses on more superficial things like change your clothes, get in shape, learn how to date, and that's okay. And I did all those things when I went through divorce, but there's much deeper. Like let's go to the soul, let's go to the heart.
I love that you said that because that's exactly, why I'm in the space I'm in, is that there's a very underserved need to help men, on a deeper level, since we're talking about the soul, by the way, helping men how to read emotions. because I brought up on a podcast a little while ago, and I got a lot of applaud for this one, but I said, there's always this statement in society that women are overly emotional. And I don't see that. I see women are taught how to feel emotions. That's why they have an array of it. Us men, the thing we're taught to be is be tough, suck it up. Like you can figure it out. And so what that does though is it suppresses us. And so the only thing we really know how to do is either be silent or be angry. And that anger part, by the way, is really us trying to express our emotions because there's always something behind anger. It's not always anger that leads. There's always a deeper soul emotion underneath that. And so I do feel and agree with you that men are very underserved in that area of actually getting the counseling or therapy or coaching that they need to learn those things on a deeper level. Because I don't believe that yeah, men that are going through a divorce, I don't think you need to learn how to work out or dress better or learn how to date. I don't think those things are very, they're superficial and very surface levels where I'd put those things. But
Mhm.
if you don't know how to actually fix those deep-rooted core problems you have inside you, or I'll call them challenges, I don't like to call them problems when you're able to face those things, though, you become a better person, and all those other things fall in line for you very easy. So it's really about getting down to the core of what's driving those behaviors, those actions. Where do you not feel seen and heard or understood? And giving men that space to say it's okay to feel. It's okay to have emotions beyond anger. It's okay. You've alluded to a lot in this podcast, a deep rooting loving care for your children. You even gave the example of I, got caught by them talking bad about my spouse at the time, and I feel guilt for that. That was a very powerful statement that she made, that I thought was really reflective of a man who's actually learned to understand his emotions and how he feels, and actually focus on his behavior and make different choices. I think that was a very powerful statement you made earlier.
That took a lot of work to get to that point because I think in the past I would have been defensive or angry over it. Um, the Brene Brown talks about, and sorry, I have 2 points here. I don't mean that. I think there's two extremes. There's the extreme where you push down your emotions and you just bear in and bear down and fight more, and then there's the extreme where you go and hug in the forest and cry and scream around a fire. And they both maybe have their places for us, but I think there's something in the middle of that where you feel the emotion and you decide that you don't act on it. And I call it the pause. You feel the emotion, you pause, and then you act. And that pause gives you, a little bit of time to go, oh, I'm having an emotion over this. We can look at it later, but just catch it. And then you're not acting from the emotion, you're acting from a different place. You're not your emotions, you're not your thoughts, you're something else. And that's one of the things I teach. Um, so that's one. To your point about emotional literacy, most people, and I think most men, I could be wrong on this. Brene Brown talks about this. Most people have emotional literacy of something like three or four emotions, like anger, sadness, fear, and maybe jealousy. When in actuality, I think it takes 30, I think she said, I could be wrong on that, but 25 to 30, somewhere there, 25 to 30 emotions in order to be emotionally mature and literate. And that's really learning to listen. That's learning to listen to the subtle difference between anger and fear. And they might feel very similar in the body, and one might override the other, or anger and irrationality, frustration, anger and frustration, those two can feel very similar. But learning to tell the difference really tells you where you're at and what's going on.
And I love that you brought that up because that is something that I learned from Tony Robbins as well. He said there's over 30 something different emotions, like you said in the dictionary, and he said most people cycle through six every day. And I remember him saying this. He's like, most people go from happy, sad, overwhelmed, depressed, pissed off, frustrated, angry. He said those are the ones people stay in for the most part, but there's always these other emotions outside of that. And I think that what you've alluded to in a lot of ways about emotional literacy, and I try to coach people on this, if you're listening to respond to things, it's a very powerful place. But if you're just listening to react to something, you're being guided by your emotion. And that's where I think that as a coach, this is something I've had to learn. It's taken me a lot of years, and I'm still practicing and learning it, is that be the observer in those moments when you are feeling emotions. Because a lot of times, just because you feel an emotion doesn't necessarily mean it's communicating how you feel. And so, I've oftentimes talked to people on coaching calls that were very, very angry with something going on. And what I see underneath all that, and they don't see it half the time, is a cry for help. I'm not being seen or heard or understood with something. And so when they say I'm angry or pissed off or frustrated, I say, what's causing you to feel that way? And they'll say, well, I just don't feel this way about X. And they'll describe that feeling outside of anger and frustration. And that's where we can dive underneath that emotion that presents itself initially down to the soul that you were talking about a little earlier, diving down there, because that's where when we get to that core feeling, now we're being honest with ourselves, we're being authentic with ourselves, and we can actually address how we feel in a very productive way that can create a better outcome for us than just saying, I'm angry.
Like you said, it's a more powerful place to live. If somebody else is, I'm shocked every day at how much other things try to poke at your emotions. And it could be an ex, it could be a friend, it could be the media, it could be advertising, it could be your politicians. And if you learn to catch those things, you'll notice when somebody else is poking at your emotions, like fear over this, fear over that. And then you're always responding from the emotion. But if you can learn that pause, learn that there's that third entity there, like not emotions, not thoughts, something else. And if you can learn that, um, you're much more powerful, and you can act from strategy rather than reaction.
And I love the way you said that. It reminds me of just being the observer in your life, not taking anything. I read a book by Miguel Ruiz. It's called Mastery of Life, and the five attachments, I think is what he called it. And he talked a lot about in that book of how when we attach ourselves too strongly to our emotions, we become very reactive, as you said, and those oftentimes lead us to outcomes that we didn't want or desire, and even the ones we didn't need. But because we were such in that heightened reaction state, we're now getting something we don't even want on top of that initial situation that put us there in the first place. But where you said about emotions, giving yourself that gap, which I like to call the pause, I think you referred to as that too. We don't always have to respond to those emotional triggers that come up. And I think you made a big point because life today is extremely reactive. I see it every day when I go out. Everybody's always in a hot hurry to get somewhere. Everybody's very hot when it comes to talking about politics. They get triggered by reading one news headline or their friend has a different belief than them. And things spiral very fast today. And I think it's a lack of awareness, like you're talking about, when we step in that place to give ourselves control and power back, to just observe and witness that emotion, not attach to it, but just watch it and see what it's trying to say. We then get a choice how we want to respond. And I think that's the big power that can ultimately shape and change us into better people.
Agreed, and that's not running away from them. I I, I don't know if you said that, but yeah, don't run away from the emotions, and don't push them down. They're going to come out at some point. And if you push them down, it's like those that can of spray of snakes. It's going to blow up in your face one day and come out when it wants to.
That's a beautiful analogy for that moment. Jeff, I want to ask you a powerful question here. When you look at your grief journey you've gone through with divorce and who you are today and who you're becoming, how has grief changed you?
I don't I don't know that I even knew what grief was. What it, like I don't think I was emotionally literate for a long time, and I think it's only now that I'm really learning to know what grief feels like. Um, and it's very similar to depression, I think. and that it's a heavy, heavy emotion, and it slows you down and um, forces you to feel it. But it's the best way I can say it is that I'm learning what I don't prefer. Um,
Mhm.
it's like this guideline of or guardrails of don't go this way again because you don't want to feel this grief. Um, so I'm still learning to navigate it, but it's like um, learning to listen to it better. That's what I meant when I said, I'm still catching the I'm still learning to listen for the feathers. Um, it's teaching me to stay away from those dark edges and go into the light. And um, I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. I've gotten in relationships with people I shouldn't have. I've stuck around in relationships far too long, and I don't know that I had that guidance. I wasn't really taught how to listen to those sort of things. So it's really helped me to build wisdom.
What was that phrase you brought up earlier in the podcast about wisdom?
Wisdom is what happened minus the emotion.
I found that such a powerful phrase. That's the first time I've heard that used. And I think what I hear from that is that, back to kind of how I phrase it too, is just you become the observer at that point because when you remove your emotions from something, you're fully able to see that situation for what it is, not what you think it is. And I think that gives you a lot of power and control over your decisions and how you feel about that situation and how you want to respond to it.
Yes, but the difference, I agree with you. The one nuance I would add here, or the bit of nuance I would add here, is sometimes there's emotions over the past, and sometimes there's emotions focused on the future, and sometimes there's emotions focused on the present. So fear would be either present or in the future. I'm scared of what's going to happen. Whereas depression or grief is what's happened in the past. So learning to tell the difference of which way you're looking helps to develop a strategy over how you're going to handle that emotion. So developing wisdom is looking at the past and going, well, what actually happened? Not my perception of it, but what actually happened there. What should I have done? Or what maybe not what should I have done, but what would have been a better way to handle it? What would I have preferred to come out of that event?
That's extremely powerful. And I never really thought of emotions in that context you just brought up, but that's a very profound way to look at them, by the way. Is this emotion living right here in the present moment? Is it living in the past? Is it living in the future? Because I think that's a very powerful way that you can actually further understand your emotions and which way they're guiding you. I think that was very powerful. I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, let me up that one little bit more. Um, Eckhart Tolle talks about power of now. So past is over with, it's happened. Future hasn't happened yet. You don't know what's going to happen. Can't say with certainty what's going to happen. All that matters is right now. So if you get out of that, and that gets rid of most of the emotions. And so then if you stop worrying about what happened in the past, you stop worrying about what happened in the future, you can be fully present, and that's where you feel the strongest. Now, that's I fully acknowledge that's one of the easiest things to say and the hardest things to do. It takes time.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. I read that book about 3 years ago and I sat there and said, that is a challenge every day. Very easy to say. And when I was tried to practice it, and I'm still practicing, I'm going to say that I'm not an expert at that. But it's definitely a place that if you are, future leaning or living in the past too much, it's a powerful, powerful, powerful book to help you question yourself in those moments, to bring yourself back to the present moment, which is what you have right now. And as you said, it can help get rid of a lot of very daunting emotions that kind of prevent you from just living your life right here in the moment, and making decisions that better align with you.
Totally.
So, Jeff, you've been an awesome guest on the podcast today. I'm so glad we got to meet. There's a lot of profound wisdom in this episode that I'm very grateful that you shared today. As we wrap up the podcast, I usually ask my guests a couple questions at the end. The one that I'll ask to start with is if you were to run into somebody who is going through grief or experiencing that right now, what's one thing you would share with them that would help them move forward just a little bit easier?
Feel it and learn to listen to what it's telling you.
I love that. And then, if people want to connect with you after listening to today's episode, where can we find you?
Divorcedaddy.com, divorce-daddy.com. I have a starter kit there that helps you to learn how to start feeling those emotions and navigating that. It, I've got some stuff in there on developing wisdom and some exercises.
I love that. Well, I'll be sharing your links in the show notes. So for everybody listening today, go to the show notes on Podbean or on YouTube, and I will have Jeff's links in there so you can connect with him. Jeff, again, I just want to thank you for being a guest on today's podcast. You shared a lot of profound information about how we can navigate emotions a little bit easier through the trying times of our life and for us to actually grow as people through that process. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Well, thank you for hosting this. This is important kind of conversations to be had. So I appreciate you starting the conversation.
And I want to thank our listeners today for joining Jeff and I on today's episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody who you know could benefit from Jeff's story. For more episodes that are designed to empower you and support you during your grief journey, visit empowergriefjourney.com. And you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple and Spotify as well. The Empower Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you to know you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.